Good morning, everybody. Hope everybody's fine on this lovely rainy morning. So yeah, my name is Mark Ward. I'm a digital schoolhouse teacher. For those that don't know what digital schoolhouse is, we are a program that offers computer science sessions to primary schools and secondary schools to help them improve their computer science. So what we're going to do this morning, we're going to look at some various different sessions, looking at games development and how that ties into the whole program that you're going to be looking at for a little while. So I'm just going to share my screen with you a moment. Okay, hopefully you can all see my screen. There we go, that's okay. So what we're looking at today, we're going to look at different game mechanics and how we're going to use how you can create a game using some of those game mechanics in a program called Construct 3. Now, you'll need a few things for this session if you haven't got them already. There are a couple of worksheets that I think were distributed or that were available to you. If you haven't got those, just a pen and paper will be fine. And if you are following along with the Construct 3 things that we do, make sure that you've got access to the internet and a web browser. You'll be able to get onto Construct 3. It's all web-based, so you don't need to download any program at the moment. Just in case you haven't done there, you can see the Mentee code at the bottom of the page, 32980402, just to make sure that you are registered for the program this week. The two worksheets that you'll need, are the Part-Bet Games one, the mind map sheet and the primary game mechanics sheet. Like I said, if you haven't got those, don't worry too much. If you've got some pen and paper, you'll just be able to take part exactly the same. It's not a problem. Okay, so what is it that we mean by game mechanics? Game mechanics are the rules that control how the game and the player interact with each other. In terms of computer science, you might call these algorithms. So the example there on the screen is talking about a rule that to avoid enemies. I'm sure lots of you have played computer games before, and that is one of the primary objectives of a lot of games, is to avoid the enemies. But there are lots of different other things as well that you might want to include in a game. Things like not being able to touch the floor. I know if you're looking at like a platform game like Mario, a lot of the sections in there you're not allowed to touch. You just kind of fall through holes in the ground. There's lava, etc., etc. Not be able to do the same thing twice in a row. Bouncing off walls. Can only select certain items. Can only select connecting items. You have a limited inventory. Can only move forwards. One life only, and limited time. Again, some of the games that you've already played may well have some of these mechanics already in, some of these rules that you can do. So how does that actually work in the real world, first of all? So imagine the game It or Tag or whatever it is that you call it. This is a game that is played in playgrounds, and what what you have to do is to avoid being caught by the person who is it. So that is what we mean by the game mechanic in that particular game. So avoiding the person who is it, linking it back to what we said earlier, avoiding the enemies, and then other things that you could use, other mechanics in there. If you get caught, you must stand still if you're out, or it might be that you have to sit down, have to go to another part of your play area, that kind of thing. But there's lots and lots of different games that include different mechanics. Okay, so we're going to quickly just talk about a few different games. Then I'm going to give you time to have a think about what are the mechanics involved in each game. Oh, sorry, my mouse is going a bit crazy. So the newspaper game, if you haven't played the newspaper game before, this is where you stand on a piece of paper and there's one, if you're not stood on a piece of paper, you are out. And then every round you take away a piece of paper, a bit like musical chairs kind of thing, but with newspaper. Just to give you an example, if I just stop sharing my screen 1 second and then change my camera. We have some Lego characters there playing, but not with newspaper. They're having to stop and stand on the Lego piece. So you would just have your Lego character moving around. They would all be moving around when the music stops, or when somebody says stop, they would then have to stand on. Obviously, this little character would be out. So the next round, we remove another piece, and then there are now 3 characters, 2 pieces of paper. You get the idea. Okay, to go back into my PowerPoint. Sorry about this. You'd think, being a teacher, that I would be used to this kind of technology, but lockdown has affected us all very differently, and this kind of tech is still all very new to me, doing live presentations as opposed to teaching, stood in front of people. Okay, musical statues. When the music stops, strike a pose. If you repeat a pose, you're out. Keeper of the keys. Now, this one's quite a difficult game to play. I was never any good at this game. The person who has the keys has to turn away from the rest of the people playing. They have to sneak up and grab the keys without being seen. Memory game. Remember the items in the inventory. You can either add something extra or take something away, and then you have to spot the extra item or which one has been taken away. Musical chairs, as we said earlier, very similar to the newspaper game. When the music stops, sit on a chair. Now, the difference with this one is you can't go backwards. All right, if you have to go backwards, then you are out. And again, you take a chair away after each round. So all these things, these rules, these are what we would call the game mechanics. Wink murder. Somebody is the murderer and somebody is the detective. The murderer has to wink at people and they die in the most dramatic way possible. And the idea of that is for the detective to work out who the murderer is before everybody has died. Pictionary. I'm sure you're all aware of the game Pictionary, but again, let's just go through that and have a little game of Pictionary. So the idea of Pictionary is that I draw something and you have to try and guess what it is. Now, if you can guess what it is with my absolutely rubbish drawing skills, you all deserve to win the prizes that were talked about earlier. Okay, there you go. My absolute rubbish drawing skills. Oh, they can't even see it. There we go. So if anybody can guess that, you're a better person than I. Obviously, though, you should be able to guess that that is an aeroplane. Yes, I did say my drawing skills weren't the best, but you get the idea. All right, so what I'd like you to do now is, using the worksheet or a piece of paper you haven't got the worksheet, is to identify some of those game mechanics that we've used. So the game mechanics I'll put back on in a second for you to have a look at. So just think of some of those games and what those game mechanics could be. If you'd like to put some of the answers up into the Menti section, if you can, obviously you need to put the Menti code in, 32980402. So I'm just going to go back to the list of rules and think of some of those games and where those rules might come in. So it's going to give you a short while to do that. I'll give you 30 seconds or so. Just have a look, try and think of a couple. Okay, so just quickly go through some of the games if you can't remember the games. Okay, and there's the sheet that we're going to look at. Okay, so in terms of the newspaper game, the obvious mechanic there is that you can't touch the floor. So when the music stops, you must be standing on a piece of paper. You're not allowed to be touching any other part of the floor. Okay, musical statues. When the music stops, strike a pose. If you repeat a pose, you're out. So the game mechanic there would be not doing the same thing twice in a row. Getting the keys from the keeper without being seen. Quite obviously there, the mechanic is must not be seen. Okay, limited inventory for this one. If you're remembering all the items in the inventory, we'll only have a limited number of things, taking one away, adding one in. All right, musical chairs. The idea being that you can't go backwards in musical chairs, so it's only moving forwards is our mechanic. Only one life. Okay, if you are winked at in this particular game, then you have to die and you're out of the game. Okay, and the idea with Pictionary is that you have to guess in only a limited time. Okay, but this isn't just a thing for real world games. Game mechanics make up computer games. Okay, the rules, the things that you have to do within a computer game, this is all about moving this now into the world of computer games. Okay, so just as an example, this is my favorite computer game. Hopefully this video will work. This is the most amazing game called Bubble Bobble. Now, what I like about this particular game is that in a moment, it actually gives you some of the game mechanics straight away. So trap enemies inside bubbles, burst bubbles with horns or fins, and then talking about some of the more advanced mechanics within this game. You might think this is a very simple game, but in reality, it's an absolute demon. Okay, so let's have a look at some of this in action. So you can see there, catching the bubbles, catch the monsters in the bubbles and pop them. And that's level 1 complete. Okay, what our games often do as part of their mechanics is to start off really quite easy just to get the player used to how to play the game, used to using those mechanics. And then as the game goes on, it gets progressively more difficult. In this particular game, there are 100 levels, so the first few are relatively easy. You can see other mechanics coming in there. There's lots of items that you can collect to score extra points. You might notice in a moment some letters appearing, and if you collect all the letters for the word extend, that gives you an extra life. So lots of other different mechanics and gameplay coming into action here. Okay, you can see the letters being collected there. All right, still relatively easy, but I promise you that game does get a lot more difficult. Okay, so what we're going to do now, we're going to look at the mind map sheet and thinking about your favorite game. What are the mechanics used in your favorite game? So in terms of filling this in, my favorite game, as we discussed there, was Bubble Bobble, and I'm just going to give you a couple of minutes just to think about the mechanics of your game. What kind of things are the rules that make up your favorite game? I think the chat is open, so if anybody wants to put anything into chat, I'm sure we'll be able to get some of your ideas out to everybody else that's watching. Okay, so some of the game mechanics that are in Bubble Bobble in the game that you've just seen. Obviously, avoiding the enemies, trapping the enemies in bubbles. There is a limited time. What does happen if you don't complete the level in time? Extra enemies appear on the screen and make life really difficult for you. You then have to pop the enemies once you've trapped them in the bubbles, and you can bounce on bubbles. There are more mechanics in that game, but I think they sort of tie everything up. We talked about some of the other things that could be included there, such as the idea of collecting the extra items for extra points, or to collect the letters to get the extra life. Now, although that game was actually from almost 40 years ago, some of these mechanics are the same in lots and lots of today's games. I'm sure on the game mechanics sheet that you've just filled in, some of these things will appear time and time again from game to game to game. So knowing how to put some of these simple mechanics into a game will be really useful in terms of creating a game that anybody can play and anybody can invest in, which is what we're going to be looking at soon. Before we do that, though, what I would like to do is to link to the competition. Now, this was mentioned earlier, so I'm not sure how much information you'll have had about this, but this particular competition that you're going to be looking at, it's not necessarily looking at creating a game, but it's this background that you need to know first before you could actually make the game, which is just as important as the actual finished game, the storytelling behind the game, if you like. So, App Hacker, the evil supervillain, managed to hack his way into every app in the world, causing chaos and pandemonium. He's frozen and cleared bank accounts, stolen text message photographs, circulated fake news, and broadcasted a hypnotic screensaver that is gluing people to their phones like zombies. Okay, and part of this, what we have to look at, is designing a superhero to combat the evil app hacker. Now, this links directly into game mechanics. If you were creating a game based on this, what would this do? What would the superhero do? How would he defeat the evil app hacker? What is it that app hacker would do in the game? How would that interaction be? What would that look like? Okay, so identifying those major problems that would occur if the app hacker did manage to take control of every app in the world. What would that look like in the game world? What could he do? What problems would this cause? How would you make sure that it wouldn't happen again? Linking directly there, rules and laws would you make? Okay, so what game mechanics would you have to make sure that app hacker can't take over the apps? Okay, creative and imaginative. All right, that is two key words there that are used within games development. Are you creative and are you imaginative? A lot of people think that the games development world is all about the programming side of things. Now, whilst that's very important, it's not the be all and end all. You could be the world's greatest programmer and be really, really good at coding, but actually, if your game doesn't have a story, if it's not creative, if it's not imaginative, people are going to get very bored with that game very quickly. So these skills are the key to a good game. It doesn't have to be graphically superior to other games necessarily, if you can tell and craft a very creative and imaginative story. using the game dynamics that we've discussed. Okay, visual, written, digital methods, these are all used in this. Now, this is actually used as part of the game making process. Okay, this part where you are looking at your ideas, where you're researching, where you are prototyping, which is what we're going to look at in some future sessions, building your game world before you actually got a game on the computer is really, really important. Okay, so lots of research there to do as well as part of this competition, researching online safety and security, demonstrating an understanding of different types of online safety and responsible web use. Okay, a lot of games, the one thing that makes them really, really successful is how they link to the real world. Okay, your parents, I would imagine, at some point have maybe said to you, right, that is it for screen time today. Okay, if there was more games that had links to education, things like online safety and security, bridging those two worlds, I think your parents would probably let you have a little bit more screen time if they thought that what you were doing was actually turning you into a more responsible online user. Okay, we will keep dipping back into that, but I just thought that may be the first time that some of you have seen that and spend a little bit longer on it. All right, so what I would like us to do now, we're going to have a look at the software that we're going to be using to create the game. Okay, now our second session starts at 11:15, I think. So this one finishes at 11. So in that 15-minute break, that might be a time to get onto the internet and to get the software open. So I'm just going to quickly run through some of the features of the software that we're going to be using, and then once we get to 11:15, we can dive straight in and start creating some games. Okay, so the software that we're going to be using is called Construct 3. So if you just Google for Construct 3, and the first link that should come up is the Construct 3 game making software. Okay, so it's a really, really good piece of software. This, it allows you to create games very quickly, but also has a lot of in-depth qualities about it too. So it's actually used by professionals as well as people just starting out their journeys. You can do things what we call drag and drop, where the coding isn't necessarily like text-based coding, but dragging sort of blocks of code together, or you can actually progress and do some text-based coding. So depending on where you are at school, you may have used things like Scratch already or Kodu as part of your studies, and then leading into using text-based languages like Java or Python. So with this piece of software, you can start at the beginning using the text, the drag and drop, the block-based things, and then progress into the text-based software. Okay, so from there, we'll literally just go on to try now. You don't have to pay for this. There are a few extra features if you want to buy a license for this. Maybe speak to your teachers at school about getting this into your classrooms if you haven't got it already. But from it, you can just go to launch now.
Mark,
okay, now this is...
Mark, can I just say that just before the link to Construct 3 is actually under the YouTube channel, under your video.
Oh, right, okay.
Just to let everyone know.
You're right. That's brilliant. Thank you. So so there you go. The link there is, you don't even have to even search for it. It's there available for you already. What it does do often is do some, even though it's web-based software, it does install little bits of code onto your computer. So as it says there, recommend staying up to date. It shouldn't be that that lengthy a process. It normally isn't. To do the update, and I think, yeah, there we go, straight away already updated in less than a few seconds. Okay, so once you get onto Construct 3, this is the window that you will see. Okay, now there are, in this central window at the moment, there are some examples of projects that people have already done in Construct 3 to get an idea of the kind of games that you can make. So we have their Kiwi Story, which is a side-scrolling platformer, and we have Demonar, which is a top-down view kind of dungeon crawler type of game.
Mark, can I just, sorry, mate, can I just stop you there?
Sorry.
At the moment, we're just seeing the PowerPoint rather than the. You have to share your screen and show the Construct 3 window.
Ah, right. My apologies. Thank you. I told you I wasn't very good at all this technology.
No worries at all, mate. No worries at all.
Right. Let's try that again. There we go. Hopefully that's a bit better for you.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so there is the Construct 3 window, and what you've got there, you've got the example games in the middle: Kiwi Story, Demonar, and Glocker. So 3 different types of and Pop Lab as well. So 4 different types of game. To show you the kind of games that you can create in there. Now, these are really good. I wouldn't recommend diving into these straight away just yet, because it does give you the code for them. And if you're not sure entirely what you're doing with the software, it can be a little overwhelming. But these are really good to go back in. Once you've had a little bit of a practice on these games and using the software, go in and have a look at these, because they like I say, you can get access to all the code for them, and you can see exactly how the games are constructed. Steal little bits and pieces for your own games and try things out to make your own games. Now, obviously, there are multiple side-scrolling platformer games around in the world. I'm sure you played plenty of them, but the mechanics would be very similar. So going in to have a look at the mechanics to see how that's working, that's actually absolutely fine to do that. That's why these are there, these games, so you can do that, so you can get some ideas, so you can see how things work. Okay, but we're just going to go into a new project for now to get the main window up. I'm just going to call this test. Don't worry too much about this for now. Some of these things we'll talk about as we go through the sessions later. But for now, I just want to talk to you a little bit about how the games are put together. So quite a lot going on the screen at the moment. It does look quite daunting, but actually once you get into the game and creating things, it's relatively straightforward. So the main window in the middle, this is our game window. Now you will see, if I just scroll up and down, that it's set as a particular size. We can alter that size if need be. So over in the properties window, if I click on the white space in the middle, the properties window changes, so it's the layout. So here I can start changing the size if I want to do that. You'll notice that what we have got is a dotted line around there. Now that dotted line denotes what's visible on the screen at any one time. Now, some games may just be one screen, like Bubble Bobble, for example, one screen, that was the level. But other games, like a side-scrolling game or the dungeon crawler, you may have to move around. So your game would actually be much bigger than that. And so that's where you would play around with the size of that to get it to look the size that you want for your particular level. So whilst we're on the properties section, this is when we click on things, when we put some game elements in, some assets. So we may put some characters in, some landscape in for our game. We may have sound effects. These are what we call the assets of our games, the things that make up our game. And each one of those assets will have some properties. Again, don't worry too much about it right now. This will all make sense in session 2 later, when we start actually looking at these things and making various bits and pieces. Okay, over on the project window, again, once we start building things, this will become populated. So this is where all our assets will be. Everything that makes up our project or our game will go in here. So you can see there we have videos for sound, music, video, fonts, our objects. These are maybe our game characters that we can do. A tile map window, we're not going to worry too much about in the games that we're going to look at today, but a tile map is basically, as the name suggests in a way, it's our map, our level map, and this is made up of tiles. So for example, in a dungeon crawler type game, our tiles could be floor tiles. Because we're kind of looking directly down in a dungeon crawler, you might have tiles for the walls, you might have tiles for different elements within that game, cauldrons, fire, whatever else that goes in there. So that's what the tile map section does. We've also got to put at the top some various options here. Now, I am sure that in a lot of your computer science lessons at school, you've been told this already. Make sure you save your work every 5 minutes or so. Now, although this is a web-based piece of software, the game code itself you can store on your own computer. So you can, from menu, project, and then save as, and then download a copy. You can set up cloud saves. If you have a Google Drive account or a Microsoft OneDrive account, you can set that up so it's all saved cloud-based. But for the moment, we're just going to be saving them to your local computer. Obviously, if you haven't got a cloud-based account, then that'll be you'd have to set them down to save it like that anyway. And whilst we're on the menu there, so there are different options there. You can open up other windows. So for example, if you happen to close one of the windows by mistake, you can just click there. So if the properties bar disappears, you can open that back up there. There are lots of other bars there, but again, at this moment, I think that could be too unwieldy for us, and you can see already on my screen that just having 3 open, I'm not able to see my main project window in the middle as big as I'd like to see it, really. So I think having more open windows there is going to cause a few issues. A bit like when you're using maybe some office tools, we have an undo and a redo button. Use those, you know, that they will come in really handy, especially if you do something and it gives you an unexpected result. If you're not sure and you want to trial something, well, then have a go. You know, the worst case scenario, you can hit the undo button, or even, you know, if you've not saved it and things have gone completely wrong, then you can always reopen your work that you haven't saved. Okay, we have the preview button. Does as it says on the tin, really. Once we start looking at some games, we can preview them as we're building them and test them in real time. Testing is really important when you do your game. You don't want to just completely just throw some things together and then think, right, that's it, that's my game finished, without testing it. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't really know whether all your properties that you've set up, whether all your mechanics are working properly. So it's good practice to keep previewing whenever you put something new in, whenever you add a new different bit of code, to preview and to test and to make sure that it does exactly what you want it to do before you move on. Okay, we have 4 other tabs at the end by now. As I said earlier, this is a free version of the game, and you can click on that and it will take you to the Skyra website. They're the developers, and you can purchase a full license if needs be. If you wanted to start selling games, you'll have noticed on the front page earlier maybe that there are some huge developers who use the construct. So Sega, for example, use construct to create some games. So if you wanted to sell your games commercially, I think you have to have a paid account. Start page just takes us back to where we can get a new project open, or to try one of the demos. Whilst we're here, actually, Skyra have got a really good example set So there are lots of examples. If you're not sure how to do something, there's lots and lots of examples. The people behind it, there's lots and lots of demos, like I say, examples, instructions on how to do things, templates. So the guys behind the scene are really good at helping you out to try and make your games. Layout one, this was where we were earlier with our initial layout on. So obviously, if you have more than one level in your game, this may become layout 2, layout 3, layout 4, and so on and so on. The games that we're going to be working on this week will just have one level, just to make life a little bit easier for you. But you know, games do have multiple levels, as I'm sure you're aware, and so that is where your different levels would appear. Okay, the event sheet, this is perhaps the most important part of this. Okay, at the moment, this is empty because we've not got anything on, but this is where we build our code for how things work. Okay, the layout is how it looks, and the event sheet is how everything works. So this is where we will start to build our game mechanics. This is where we will put in the code that it shows how our characters interact with the scenery, with other creatures, with other elements in the game. This is where it all comes together. Okay, so I will just put on a very a quick demo for us of what we're going to be doing later. We've only got 5 or so minutes left, but I think now you've seen an empty one, I can show you how things change once we open things up. So if I go to open, and then open from local browser. Yeah, that's okay. Oh. No, it's not. No, I'm not sure why it's doing that. But yeah, so well, in fact, what I'll do then, because I'm not sure why that's working, I will just go and open up Kiwi Story so you can see what's going on. As I said, this might look a little bit overwhelming at first because there's quite a lot going on, but there are lots of different things that you can see. Now things have changed slightly because we've now got a game open. Now we have, this is our layout for the main menu. Okay, and this is the bit that we actually see. They've resized it, so we've not got that dotted section. You can just sort of see just underneath there, we've still got the dots that show us this is our main page. The main thing that's changed here is our project. So we've now got all the elements needed for our game. Okay, all the enemies within there, so you can see lots of different sprites that make up our enemies, lots of different sounds that go on, lots of music, and so on and so on. So that's where everything's stored, as I said earlier. And then when we click on things, we can change their properties here, and we can also look at the coding for them as well. Okay, so like I alluded to, this is really the end of that journey, the game development journeys where you actually start making the game. A lot of people seem to think that this is it. This is what being a games developer is. Now, the actual creation of the game is only part of it. Okay, so we're going to look at this, but obviously we're going to look at the journey as a whole in terms of the other things that we do. So if I just go back to my PowerPoint. And take us back to the start of this PowerPoint. 1 second, sorry. Okay, so what we've looked at the game mechanics. Now, the game mechanics are your starting point for any games development. The first thing you need to know is what you want your game to actually do. Okay, then you can link that as we looked at the competition and the story. That is what you would link it to. Link those game mechanics to your story. What is it that your game is about? What is it that's going to hook your audience in? And that would then link into how it would be coded, how it would be created using a game engine such as Construct 3. Okay, so that's a little bit there about the journey for you, how the whole thing packages together. So you don't have to be a super coder to be involved in the gaming industry. Now, I'm sure you're going to have lots and lots of other information this week about the gaming industry as a whole, but I think it's really important that although my sessions are going to be focused on some of the more practical things in terms of making a game, that if that isn't for you, but you still feel that you want to get into the gaming industry, there's lots of other avenues in there. If you're quite arty, you could be a graphic designer in the games industry. If you're good at English, at literacy, the story, as we talked about earlier, is absolutely huge in terms of how the whole story, of how the whole game is put together. It's not just coding that makes it, is the point I'm trying to get across. So what we're going to do in the next session is we're going to be looking at how we're going to put some of those mechanics that we looked at, some of these, we're going to put them into a game. So we're going to have a full game that we're going to try and create in session 2. And I will give you a short break now. I'll hand back over and then I'll see you all in about 15 minutes.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much, Mark. That was really interesting. And I think, we are, and I'm certain lots of the people at home can't wait to see Construct 3 in action, because it looks really exciting what you can create. So, yeah, we're looking forward to it. So for everyone